Hello, fellow birders. My name is Denis Kania. Today we're going to be taking a look at Blue Grosbeak and Indigo Bunting. On the DuPage Birding Club Education channel, we'll be discussing all things bird-related. And as I mentioned, today we'll be taking a closer look at Blue Grosbeak and Indigo Bunting. So here's an all-blue bird. This one happens to be Indigo Bunting. And it's the expected bird that birders will come across when they're working in brushy areas or wooded edges. So with changes in our climate, that picture is changing, and we can't assume that we're always looking at an indigo bunting. So we need to delve a little deeper into this. Here are records that we've collected at Fermilab over the last 33 years, and you can see that indigo buntings have been with us all through the whole survey, all the way to the beginning back here in the late 80s and all the way up to the current time. And you can see that indigo buntings in migration are showing up around the beginning of May, and they're with us as a breeding species all the way through September and well into October. Beyond that point, they're pretty hard to come up with. Blue Grosbeak, on the other hand, you can see during all of the early survey periods, there are no records whatsoever. It's not until we got into the 2012-2016 survey period, which is indicated by this bar in the graph. You can see that we started having quite a bit of luck in coming up with that species. And so it was a breeding species on site at that time. And so we did get more records. Now in the next survey period, which runs 2017 and is currently running, we have some observations of that bird, but we don't have any confirmation of it breeding. And this is pretty much the case all across the county. If you do look at some other sites, this species does show up as a breeding species. That's been documented at the Morton Arboretum. I've located them at Hidden Lake, which is adjacent to the Morton Arboretum, and I've seen a female there that was carrying food for young. And then I think they've also shown up at some other sites in the county. I think there's records coming from Pratt's Wayne Woods, and there might be some records also coming from down in the Green Valley area. So it is spread across the county. We are seeing these birds now more frequently than we did in the past. So definitely we need to keep our eye open for them. So here's a look at indigo bunting. And you can see that this individual does not have very much black in the face. You can see that the lower is dark, but beyond that, there's really not much black going on. And another key feature to look at as far as plumage would be to look at the coverts in the wing. Here's the median coverts, and here are the greater coverts. And you can see that there is no warm coloration in here at all. There's no chestnut or buff or anything like that. All of these median covert feathers are tipped in blue, as are these greater coverts. If we look at the female, as far as plumage, you can see that she's very dull brown, very consistent with what a female blue grosbeak would look like. Although if we look at the wing bars here, we can see they're very faint and they're very buff in color. We can see that the breast is very plain, except for very diffuse streaking across that breast. That's something that would be absent on the blue grosbeak female. You can see that the throat is pretty much whitish, and that would not be the case on the blue grosbeak female. Structurally, if we look at these birds, the indigo bunting tends to look a little smaller headed than blue grosbeak. And if we look at the bill, and especially in profile here, it's pretty easy to see that the height of the bill compared to the length of the bill is quite different. You can see it's much longer than it is tall. And so on blue grosbeak, we'll see that the structure is quite a bit different. Another feature to look at structurally would be the tail, and indigo buntings will tend to look shorter tailed, and their tails will be more squared off. And when we look at the grosbeak, we'll see that it's more of a rounded tail. So let's look at those grosbeaks. So again, starting with the male, you can see that there is really a lot of black in the face here. It's not only the lower, but it also goes into the forecrown here, and you can see it's even coming down and surrounding the bill a bit. So a lot more black in the face. And then as far as the coverts, the wing coverts, you can see that the median coverts here are very chestnut, and you can see that the greater coverts are tipped in chestnut as well. So you get two wing bars, and they're very warm in color, contrast quite a bit with the blue of the body. Looking at the female, you can see again, it's a very warm brown body overall, very similar to what we were seeing on the female indigo bunting. but the wing bars are much stronger, and you can see that the median coverts here are much warmer brown, kind of a chestnut. And then if we get down to the wing bar that's formed by the greater coverts, you can see that it's very, very buffy. The throat matches the rest of the underparts, and so it's kind of a cinnamon buff in color, and there is no streaking going on here at all. So structurally, if we look at these birds, you can see that the grosbeak looks larger headed. And then we talked about the fact that the bill would be quite different. And you can see that the height of the bill here at the base compared to the length of the bill, those are almost equal in distance or in length. So that's going to give you a different look than what you're seeing on that indigo bunting. It's a much wider bill at the base. And again, you know, a more stout bill. And you can see that here in the male as well. If you take a look at the height of the bill from top to bottom, comparing that to the length of the bill going out, those two lengths are almost equal. Another structural feature that I wanted to mention was, again, the tail. And so the grosbeaks are going to look longer tailed, and the ends of their tail are going to look more rounded. It's kind of hard to see on this angle here, but it's kind of a rounded tail. Difficult here as well, but you kind of get a sense of that it's kind of a rounded tail. So those would be the main features to look at when comparing these two species. So keep all of those features in mind. The overall body plumage is very similar between those two species, so it does require a close look. But to separate the males, it's important to note the extent of black in the face, and it's also important to look at the color edges of those median and greater coverts. The female can be separated by the strength of those and color of those wing bars, and the presence of faint streaking on the breast of the indigo bunting. And the bunting should also have a whitish throat. The bill is decidedly larger on the grosbeak than it is on the bunting, and a good way to determine that is to compare the width of the bill at the base to the overall length of the bill. And these measurements should be nearly the same on the grosbeak, whereas you'll definitely see that the length of the bill is a longer measurement than the height of the bill. And there were some other features that I also mentioned about the tail being longer on the grosbeak, and also being rounded at the corners on the grosbeak. So thanks for taking the time to view this video. Hopefully we've given you some bird food for thought. And I hope you'll join us again in the future as we explore all things bird related.